Hello, and welcome to our program, Afrocentricity. I'm your host, Michael Washington, and today's program is entitled The Ellington Legacy at Northern Kentucky University. Yes, you heard it right, the Ellington Legacy, as in Edward Kennedy or Duke Ellington, a legendary figure whom some consider the greatest jazz composer and band leader of the 20th century. Others argue that he defied categories and was therefore not just America's greatest jazz composer, but America's greatest composer because of his refusal to conform to any preconception of what he or his music should do. For half a century, he proved to the world that his instrument was not merely the piano, but the American orchestra itself. After Duke died in 1974, his son, Mercer, took over leadership of the orchestra until his death in 1996. Mercer had composed for his father in the early 1940s, and during the 1950s, he played alto horn for him and also worked for him as general manager and copyist. In the 1960s, he worked with his father's orchestra as trumpeter and road manager. After taking over Duke's orchestra in 1974, Mercer also became the first person to conduct a Broadway musical of his father's music, Sophisticated Ladies, which ran from 1981 until 1983. In 1988, Mercer's Digital Duke won the Grammy Award for Best Large Jazz Ensemble Album. After Mercer's death in 1996, his son Paul kept the Duke Ellington Orchestra alive, and his eldest son, Edward Kennedy Ellington II, maintains a band called Duke Ellington Legacy. His daughter, Mercedes Ellington, is president of the Duke Ellington Center for the Arts. Dancer and choreographer Mercedes Ellington was the firstborn of Mercer's children. In 1960, she graduated from the Juilliard School with a BA degree in classical and modern dance and went on to an outstanding career, beginning in Australia with her first professional role in a production of West Side Story. She appeared in several productions at the New York City Center before making history in 1963 as the first African American member of the June Taylor Dancers, the featured performers on the Jackie Gleason show during the early years of television. After spending 7 years with the June Taylor Dancers, Mercedes moved on to perform many shows on Broadway, where in 1981 she starred in Sophisticated Ladies alongside her father, who conducted the Duke Ellington Orchestra. In 1983, she co-founded Ballet Tap, later named Dance Ellington, with Maurice Hines, and went on to produce several award-winning musicals. In 2004, she founded Duke Ellington Center for the Arts, a nonprofit organization dedicated to scholarship, education, and performance connected to the legacy of Duke Ellington. While attaining these accomplishments, she made time to mentor one of the faculty members at Northern Kentucky University, and here today to share her experiences with Mercedes Ellington is Professor Tracy Bonner, BFA Dance Coordinator and Associate Professor of Dance at Northern Kentucky University. Hi, Professor Bonner.
Hello, Dr. Washington.
Alas.
Yes.
You have years of experience with Mercedes Ellington.
I do.
And you brought her here to perform at Northern Kentucky University.
Yes, I brought her in to choreograph and work with our dancers in our faculty concert. So.
And that was, this is 2022, and that was in 2018 or so.
Yes, sir.
And could you tell us a little bit about that project?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the dancers, our dancers at Northern Kentucky haven't always had a lot of experience with true jazz and working with live jazz music. And that's where Mercedes has her specialties. So I wanted them to have that experience. Even though we couldn't have live musicians completely, we did have a live violinist play on stage, play part of Scheherazade, and that person interwove and danced with the dancers while they performed. And it was a wonderful experience. They did a little jazz, they did a little tap, and they loved having her in our midst for a week. So.
And did students, were they able to have their photo taken with her?
They were, yes. We got some great shots after the show. Many of the students gathered out in the lobby, and we had a reception for Mercedes while she was here. And so we got a great picture of a bunch of the dancers and Mercedes kind of in celebration of performance that night.
And you knew her long before that.
I did, yes.
Let's see a little bit about your background.
Sure.
And then let's kind of connect that with how you met up with Mercedes. You're from Kentucky, from Lexington, Kentucky.
I am from Kentucky, yes, sir.
But you went to school in New York.
Correct. Correct.
Give us some background from New York to all the way down to Shenandoah Conservatory, all the way over to University of California. Of course, you did some Radio City work.
Yes.
And yeah, give us some background.
Well, I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm the child of two educators, so education was always incredibly important to my parents. Got accepted at the Shenandoah University, or Shenandoah Conservatory, and got a scholarship there. Got my undergraduate degree in musical theater and dance from that university, and about 6 months later booked a national tour with the chorus line. And that's very rare when I tell dance and theater students. It sometimes takes many years for people to book a gig that high profile, and I was very lucky and very blessed, but I was also very prepared. And toured with that show and several other shows, and that led me to a career in New York City working on Broadway shows, working on shows at Radio City, at the City Center, and one of the shows that I worked on during that time, I auditioned for Mercedes Ellington. And I knew her only by name, but when I auditioned for her, she brought me into her cast, and we quickly developed a wonderful bond, and it's a bond that continues today. So she's still someone I call. She's still on my reference list when people want to hire me for things. She's a very special mentor to me.
So how did that take place? I mean, you're a white person.
Yes.
She's a black person.
Yes.
And most of the dancers, I suspect, were black.
Absolutely.
So how did that happen?
Well, very often I was one of the only white people in her group, and that gave me incredible honor to be accepted into a community that was not one of my own heritage. It also told me that my skill was good, because I would not have been allowed to be a part of that community had I not really known my stuff, right? So, so the first time I auditioned for her was for a show called George M., which is a musical about George M. Cohan, and she was serving as the choreographer. And when I auditioned for her, I wasn't very impressive the first time. And
she saw you?
She saw me audition.
And she wasn't, you could tell that she...
Yes, she kind of liked me, but she didn't, But the director and I had a previous working relationship. And so I remember at the audition him kind of holding his clipboard over his face and having a conversation with her, and I knew they were talking about me. And he held his clipboard over his face, and then they asked me to dance again, and I did better the second time. And they invited me to be a part of the cast, and that was the beginning of my part of the Ellington legacy, and what an honor to be a part of that.
So you danced immediately after that.
Correct.
And it was, the first one was kind of like a warm-up for you, I guess.
Correct,
and
yeah.
And you felt as if, now I'm going to show him my stuff.
Exactly,
and
exactly.
my man, he knew that you could do this stuff.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
she kind of...
And she kept giving me opportunities, and I worked with her company, and I worked as her assistant a lot. So I worked as an assistant for her on a Broadway show. Sometimes even if she got offers for jobs that she couldn't do because she was already booked in something else, she would offer those jobs to me. And so I got a lot of great experience as a young choreographer because of that too. So.
And she took you under her wing.
She did.
And you became a person who could negotiate
yes.
different situations.
Yes, and I think very often much of what I recognize now, I may not have recognized it as much at that time, is I helped open doors for her that maybe didn't open for her as a Black woman, and now I recognize the value of that. I don't think I recognized it at the time. I just knew that this was a woman that deserved my honor and respect, and so for me, as a young performer, that's where I was looking at it from, and now as an older performer, I see the value of what I offered her in those moments.
Now, the dances that you would do, I know tap.
Tap, lots of tap.
Was a big part of it.
Yeah.
But did you also do some African dancing?
Yes, we did.
In addition to the ballet?
Yeah, much of the work that I did with her was very similar to the work that she did with the June Taylor dancers. So kind of Rockette-oriented, drill team kind of, groups and lines of dancers all moving together and being very synchronized in the work. As we progressed, as she got other opportunities and other gigs and I got to go with her, the work got to be more advanced or got to be more improvisational or more jazz oriented. So it just kind of depended on the opportunities that were presented and how we got to expand on that.
Now you would practice your choreography and you would know exactly what genre or what that you would be, and you would never go across genres. You would just do the ballet or do the...
No, we would mix it up.
You would mix it up?
Yeah, I mean, she even did that when she came here with the dancers. She had some people in tap shoes and some people in jazz shoes. And it kind of freaked the students out because they didn't know. They were like, well, what are we supposed to do? And I'm like, just do. Just keep going.
And you knew
I knew what she was doing, yeah.
And you could actually go out and show them how to do the movements.
Yes.
How would you have learned that?
Well, I learned from her, and a lot of the way that she taught dance, especially as she aged and wasn't able to physically do as much, because lots of times I would serve as her body for her when she could not physically move.
She would have you
had me demonstrate for her, and she did that some when she was here as well. But lots of times she would teach by scatting. Right, so, and if our audience is familiar with scat singing, she would teach with the idea of ba ga da 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 ba ba da 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 da, and we would make sounds based on that music. And so that was my first understanding of the role of music and jazz and music and tap and just music and dance in general and how they marry together in the ways that they do.
So you could do a move based on that sound.
Yes.
And the move could be completely improvisational.
Correct.
As long as it coordinated with that sound.
Correct.
And so you could have tap dancing shoes on.
Yep.
Or you could be in African posture.
Yep. The rhythm could come from feet, it could come from bodies, it could come from claps or hits or connections with other people. Yeah.
Do you think that's an inherited characteristic? That's kind of like the way I think my conception of her dad did the orchestra.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. Yes, because I think that,
her granddad and her dad.
Yes, you look at the people and what their skills are, and you go, okay, well, who can do this really well, and who can do this really well? And she would often even reference when we were dancing, well, you're the hi-hat, and you're the trumpet, and you're the trombone, and you're the flute, because she wanted certain sounds in certain places. And just like in an orchestra, Some dancers dance heavier. They have a heavier sound. Some dancers have a lighter sound in their tap shoes, right? So some people are naturally going to be the bass drum, and some people are naturally going to be the flute, right?
Now, did you actually train in African dance with her? Or?
I never trained in African dance with her. My training in African dance actually came much later in life for me. I mostly did production-oriented work with her, so commercialized dance. June Taylor, Radio City, Broadway shows, that kind of thing, which now, at that time, that was the, late 90s, early 2000s, African dance had not entered into the Broadway world.
Is that
so
right?
It wasn't
even
really,
by 2000?
no, it really wasn't, it wasn't welcomed at that point. But now, that's changed, right? Now we have shows like Fela that are specifically centered on African culture and African dance. And so that's a big change in things in that world.
And you have a concept about African culture. It has to do with therapy or...
Well, yes, we've done some research organizations or research projects here at NKU, and Janita Olowe, who is our African dance specialist, has helped me with that. Dr. Chris Curran in neuroscience has also helped with that. And we did a study during the pandemic about how being a part of African dance classes helped relieve stress and improve grade point averages for our students.
And you have data.
We have data to prove it.
And your data actually shows what? That the more African dance they would do?
The African dance as a cultural experience provides community, provides physical, exercise, and also teaches body rhythm, right? And these are things that sometimes in our American culture we don't utilize. It's not part of our American culture per se.
Yeah, but don't all dance, any kind of dance, have body rhythm?
Oh, it does, but it's not the same. It's not the same because it's not culturally connected, right? So a ballet experience or a jazz experience more so is connected, but a ballet experience may not have the same cultural connection. The connection to community, the connection to people, the connection to historical significance, right? African culture, just as a Greek culture or a Jewish culture, has rites of passage that are connected to their physical movement and their physical activity. And that connects to how the community grows, how the community moves forward, who the leaders are in the community, how they interact with each other. And so that's the nature of the difference.
Would you be saying something like the difference between what we would call European classical dance and folk dance?
Yes.
That the folk has more of a therapeutic nature to it because it's a collective ideal.
It's about community, yes. And I think, terms and terminology is always changing. So some people would say ethnic, some people would say folk, some people would say some variation in there, but it's really, I think now we are at a place where we want to identify dance from the culture in which it was created. And that would mean that African dance is African dance. Whether it is also folk or ethnic, it is based in African culture.
Now, do the people at your university, Northern Kentucky University, know about your data to use to help improve their retention rates and graduation rates?
I think they do, yes. I mean, we've shared some of that data, and we have used that data to help us develop new coursework to support our Black and brown students and their involvement in more culturally relevant coursework. So this coming fall, we'll start a new class called the Music and Dance of the African Diaspora. And that class is meant to provide some cultural relevance to our Black and brown students, but also teach our non-Black and brown students what it looks like to be a part of a culture or cultural competency to something that they've never experienced before.
Now, the data from your research, is that part of how you put this course together?
It is, yes.
So you intend for this course to contribute to that process of helping African American students retain?
Yes, and this will be a general education course that will also fit into the Black Studies programming. So students can take this course as part of Black Studies, and hopefully then it will get them more involved in Black Studies, it will get them more involved in dance, and it will help them recognize that there is a place for them on this campus.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
This is a predominantly white campus using African dance to help retain African students.
Yes.
That's a magnificent concept.
Yes.
Here, give me five. Give me
Thank
five
you.
for that.
Thank you.
That's a genius model.
Thank you.
Now, you have some photos that you could you tell us what the one we're looking at now?
Sure. The first photo that you're going to see is of Mercedes and I backstage at a performance at City Center, which is a performance space in New York City. And it was one of the times that I performed for her as part of her company, and it was, you know, backstage before we went to the party afterwards, right? The second picture you're going to see, which is my absolute favorite of myself and her, she came to Kentucky, she came to Lexington in 2017 as part of a cultural event that was happening there, and I was kind of her connection to that jazz company, that jazz orchestra. And afterwards, the photographer took several pictures of the band and of Mercedes and all that stuff, and she said, well, I can't not have a picture with Tracy. And we are hugging each other and just holding each other so tight, and that picture sits on my living room bookcase so I can see it on a regular basis, because having somebody like that love you the way that she loves me and the way that I love her, that you can't make that up, you know.
But you can almost duplicate that with your love for your other students.
Yes.
For instance,
yes.
You have a student whose name is Lavette Patterson.
Yes.
Could you say a little bit about her potential and how you would see her in terms of you being her mentor in
Absolutely.
the same way that
Mercedes mentored me. Yes.
You.
Well, I think Lavette has had extensive dance training, and so she came to us at the university with a lot of skill. And I think part of what she learned during her time here was the value that she gives to her art rather than just being a product of the art. A lot of young dancers, when they come into a university system, they are coming from a background that may not, they may only think of themselves as a product of something that you do and not something that you are. And I think over the time that Lavette and I had, the 4 years that we had together, I think she developed that sense of ownership over who she is as an artist and took that on in a new way. And this spring, during our spring concert, she was actually up in New York City auditioning for Alvin Ailey. So,
and that, say something about auditioning for Alvin Ailey for our audience.
Oh,
let them know the significance of what that means.
Alvin Ailey is a signature legacy dance company that is a black dance company, and Alvin Ailey created the company specifically to develop and provide opportunities for black dancers that were not getting opportunities in the late 50s and early 60s. And that legacy company has continued over time. There have been more people that are not black and brown identifying that have been able to be a part of that company over time. Like, I know when I was a young dancer, I really wanted to be an Alvin Ailey, but they didn't let white people in at that time, so I didn't get that opportunity. But it's still a company that I love watching, and I love the legacy that they provide. And another mentor of mine, Donald McHale, who's also a renowned choreographer and artist, he worked with Alvin Ailey. Mercedes worked with Alvin Ailey. Like, I've got a lot of hands in these pies of this kind of work.
And you studied under Donald
Mr. McHale. I did.
In California.
At the University of California. That's where I got my master's degree in dance and choreography, and he was my mentor. And when I first went to California to kind of see if the school was the right school for me, because I was leaving New York and leaving a performance life to be an academic, and I didn't know if that was going to be the right choice for me. And I walked in the studio to observe class and meet him, and I said, "Hello, Mr. McHale, I'm Tracy Bonner." He goes, "Oh, you're Merce's girl." And he and Mercedes had already had a conversation about me and my potential at that university. So that kind of sealed the deal.
Well, that's magnificent.
It is.
Now,
it is.
Recently, you had a professor from the University of Texas come here. Mm-hmm. And could you talk about that process?
Sure. Tawanda Chibikwa, Dr. Tawanda Chibikwa, is just a remarkable human being on every level. He is originally from Zimbabwe, carries 3 degrees from 3 different universities here in the United States, and is currently assistant professor of Africana Studies and Dance at the University of Texas, El Paso. He He is the kind of person that works to decolonize the way that we think about dance and art and humanity, and spends a lot of his research and time utilizing movement, utilizing music, utilizing cultural competency to help us all recognize that we're all working towards the same goal.
And you brought him here, and you connected him with Livette.
I did.
And they actually created.
They did.
Kind of a synthesis, kind of their own movement.
They did. They did an interview with you for this Afrocentricity. So you've got.
And we probably can look at them as they perform.
Yeah.
So all of this is part of that whole legacy.
Yes.
That you're bringing to NKU.
Yes.
From your experiences with Mercer Ellington. Now you met her. You've been knowing her over 20 years now.
Yes. Yes.
And you stay in very, very close contact with her.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think she should be very, very proud of you. I know she has many people that she's proud of, but in this situation, this is a predominantly white institution.
Yes.
And many people here live and die and never heard the name Duke Ellington, let alone Mercer Ellington before.
Yeah.
Right? And here you are sustaining that tradition.
Yes.
Of excellence, of choreography, of jazz and music.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Folks, this has been a wonderful program. I can't say enough about the contributions that Professor Bonner is making here at NKU. And until next time, thank you. So long.